I'm a contradiction of terms, I think is probably the easiest way to describe me. I've had a very, I think by many people's standards, probably like a very linear life, a very like common life. But within that, just foolishness often. And it makes for a good time without, requiring me to kind of constantly live in trauma or flux. I think that starts at the very beginning, ironically. So I am the youngest of three. We are spaced quite a bit. My brother is 12 years older than me. My sister is 7 years older than me. I was absolutely oops baby. I was born on Friday the 13th, and my birth story in and of itself is not complicated, but also kind of hilarious. So I was born on the day of my youngest aunt's high school graduation. So my mom she's like one of 17, but of like my grandmother's children, she's the second of 12. And they are, relatively spaced. And so I was born when my parents were 35. My Amy was graduating from high school, and my mom is a nurse, and I'm her last child. So she knew she was in labor. She knew that like labor had started. She says like the night before, but she woke up, went to the graduation, took pictures. I have like a series of 3 pictures of her like joking around with other aunts, and then just kind of like turned to the family and was like, we need to go to the hospital. The baby's coming. And they're all just kind of looking at her like, what? And she's like, yeah, like this has been going on the entire graduation. So they go, I was born at Mount Sinai and here in Chicago. And she gets there and she tells them like this baby's coming. But she thinks they thought she was a new mom, or just kind of like an anxious like mom, like, oh, you got time. Like you just walked in here, you got time, so they put her kind of in a room, came back a little bit later to check on her. And by the time they checked on her, I was like crowning. She was like crowning. And so I was actually born in the hallway of the hospital because they couldn't get to the birthing room like in time between when they came to check on my mom and then when they tried to, wheel her 50 feet. I don't know how long it was, but that is like my birth story, which I find hilarious. Believe it or not, I ended up going to Carleton College, which is in Northfield, Minnesota, which is about an hour southwest of the Twin Cities. I knew nothing about that. Didn't know that school existed. Went to one of the guidance counselors at the school at Peyton with, a list of 5 schools. I think Syracuse was on there. I think Marquette was on there. Northeastern in Boston, which is actually where I ended up going for law school, but knew nothing about Carleton. And I show this list and he's like, Jessica, there's no liberal arts on this school. Or like, there's no liberal arts schools on this list. And I was like, I don't know what that means. I don't know why that matters. Like, this is what I've decided. This is what we're doing. He's like, no, I want you to look at Carleton. I was like, all right. So I go and I look and I come back and I tell him, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And he's like, why? This is a really good school. And I'm like, this is a very good school. It's like Carleton's been like in the top 10 of liberal arts schools for like the last 40 years. It's a very good school. But it's also approximately 2,000 students in Northfield, Minnesota. And so their African-American population at the time I applied was 5%, which for a school that size is actually very good. They've done their work to get students to Northfield, Minnesota, right? Like to go to school. But when you calculate that out, that's 100 Black people. And I was like, dude, I can't go from the south side of Chicago to a farm town college with 100 Black people on campus. I was like, this is not happening. But he got to my parents a report card pickup and convince them to at least make me apply. And so they made me apply and I got in. Both my parents have like their own story, their hallmark story of when they knew when I was like very young that like I was going to be the one that just kind of wandered and went. My mom's story is we have a very large family. Both my parents are like one of 17. And we had a family reunion on my mom's side here in Chicago at the Dan Ryan Woods. And there's an old tobogganing hill that's in the forest preserve. And I don't know, I'm like 1, 2 or something. And apparently, they're in the pavilion, everybody's talking. And some guy in our family, some cousin just yells, "Hey, who baby is that?" And they like turn and there's like a toddler walking up the tobogganing hill, like by themselves. And when I say it out loud now, it seems neglectful. But apparently my mom's answer was like, "Oh, that's mine. Don't worry. She'll be back." And I was just kind of like, what? She's like, "Jessica, trying to keep you from figuring out whatever you were interested in was like, it was useless." She's like, there was no point. She's like, "But you always came back. You were always kind of like, safety precautious. So at a certain point, we're just kind of like, keep her in sight, know where she is generally, but let her go." There's no stopping her. Like, let her, she'll figure it out. When she's not curious anymore, she'll come back. And I feel like that's also kind of, that same kind of curiosity integration is just kind of how I live my life in general. I think that's why I still live in the house that I grew up in. There's definitely like an economic benefit of that. But at the same time, like I'm 39, I don't have kids. It would be so simple and maybe even easier for me to live in the South Loop or live on the North Side or live in, you know what I mean? Like someplace that's kind of a little bit more in the mix of things. But at the end of the day, I like my neighborhood because of that community aspect. So, I'm a lawyer. I practice family law, estate planning, probate, which is like inheritance and guardianship of minors or disabled adults. And I started my practice through the Chicago Bar Foundation's Justice Entrepreneur Project, which helps people start small or solo law firms to help service what I call the gap group, which is essentially like those who make too much money to qualify for free legal aid, but not enough to kind of pay for traditionally priced attorneys. So we do a lot of work trying to galvanize technology to streamline some things. We do a lot with flat fees or fixed prices, subscription fees. So like you pay a flat price every month to just kind of make legal services affordable, like not cheap, like we still have to do the work, but it makes it easier when somebody can budget. But because of the type of law that I practice, I do get clients that just need that face-to-face interaction. And also because of the population that I service, not everybody has access to the type of technology that would require a remote-only practice. And not even if they have, a smartphone or a laptop, they need help working it or they don't know how to scan it. I can't tell you how many times I ask a client to scan me something. I'm like, "Hey, do you have a scanner?" And they're like, yeah, I can scan it over. And then what I get is like aerial pictures of documents that I now have to like crop and enhance. And then like trying to figure out like, that one was blurry. Can you resend it? You know what I mean? You meet your client where they are, but having the option of having your 67-year-old guardianship client that's just trying to get guardianship of their sister because their sister now has dementia. The fact that they can like come to my office, park on the street for free, like put stuff in the door box or knock on it and talk to me, drop stuff off. I can make them copies and send them, like it's a very different experience. The fact that the space in and of itself is a house is also a very different environment. So like people, I practice personal law. These are kids and marriages and divorces and dementia and guardianship and death. Like, not everybody wants to be in a glass, sterile environment bearing their family history to this person who they're paying to listen to them. Clients don't always realize what they need to update their attorney about. Like, oh, I moved, but I didn't know that like affects the rule of this law, because the case has already started. So like, there's a rule in family law where if you have kids in a custody agreement, you're not allowed to move more than 25 miles from where you lived when you made the custody arrangement, because it can affect your time. So if we both live here and you've got the kids, Thursday through Sunday, and they go to this school because, we put them in the school district where I am. But then you move to Skokie, or I move to Skokie. That's relevant, because maybe now you can't get the kids on Thursday anymore because it's too far, the traffic, or like you wouldn't be able to get them to school. The fact that they're changing school districts in the first place. So people don't always kind of understand how this can affect their cases, or like, we're all out here, lawyers are out here, but I feel like what I saw advertised on the South Side was always like bankruptcy or personal injury. It didn't feel like there was anybody kind of publicly practicing just this like everyday kind of community focused law. And so like, my office is very convenient for me, but I wanted it to also be convenient for my clients to be able to get here, people with mobility issues and, people on public transportation. Like, this is a service position. And so I wanted it to make sense. And even like my decision again to kind of go through the JEP and focus on predictable and affordable prices. I remember when I was doing that ethical work, larger law firms, big law downtown, my dad had gotten into a car accident. He got rear-ended and he was fine. He was in the hospital for a little bit with some back issues, but it was fine, nothing tragic, but it was gonna be, lawsuit and or insurance fight type of thing. So he's gonna need legal counsel. And I remember he called me and he was like, do you think one of the lawyers, like there's a lawyer at your office who could like take the case on? And I was like, absolutely not. And he was like, what? Like, what do you mean? Like, why not? And my first thought was like, Daddy, do you know how much these people charge? And so like, even just that, like, do I want to be the type of lawyer that would price out my own family? And like, my dad was a steelworker union job for like 40 years. My dad is not hard up for money. He's not, he's not a millionaire, but like my dad, like he can afford counsel. And even then I was like, absolutely not. Am I gonna refer my father to this law firm? Because I know how much they charge to be here and to be affordable, even if I was no longer in that lens where I was just working for the government or I was just doing legal aid. And I think that was kind of the point of the JEP, to be like, there are ways to be a good lawyer and a successful lawyer and make money without kind of charging or practicing in a traditional way, the way that we've seen for the last 150 years. Or there's a struggle when you're an entrepreneur, especially in the legal services, because you are aware that you could make more money. So when there's a time that it inevitably happens where maybe you want to make a larger purchase, or like money is maybe not as consistent, because it is a job. My mom to this day was just like flabbergasted when I told her sometimes people just don't pay me. And she's like, what do you mean? I was like, sometimes there's an outstanding bill and people just disappear, or they don't pay you, or they argue the bill. When I opened, my dad was concerned about like how I was going to get clients. He's like, well, how do you? I was like, well, even if I worked at a firm, I would still have to like get clients. I mean, like it's kind of the same. It's just justice minded. You know what I mean? Like, you don't want people to lose because they didn't have the money to win. You know what I mean? Like, if the case is so clearly, or it should be really straightforward, like, Mom has passed away. Dad has never been in the children's lives. Grandmother wants to get, custody or guardianship of her minor grandchildren. But like dad has now popped up after 6 years. Like couldn't tell you what size the kids wear, like doesn't know any allergies, lives in another state, and then is also threatening not to let grandmother see the children once they move. Like, does dad have to stay in these kids' lives or maybe rebuild that relationship? Absolutely. But he's not the priority. The kids are the priority. So in the face of the fact that they just lost their mother, they don't know you, I think the kids deserve some time to stabilize in the community and with the person that they know. And you build that relationship to earn custody back. Because guardianship doesn't terminate parental rights. It just says this person is not in the position now. Any cases where somebody's kids might be being withheld from them, and somebody literally runs off with the kids, or where the kids are, but they won't turn the kids over. Like those types of things. It's always hard when there are allegations, but not proof of some type of abuse. And it's not always physical, but like neglect, physical abuse, mental abuse is a big one. Like the parents are just yelling at the kids all the time, or like, calling them stupid, calling them fat, like whatever. I had one divorce case where we were stuck on a very specific issue. And we had figured out the kids, we had figured out most of the financials, but there was one issue that we had drastically different opinions on. An opposing counsel was like an older Caucasian male. And there was just like such a confidence and bravado and like cockiness that I did start to be like, am I wrong? Am I reading this statute wrong? Is this not, I won that case because I was. So but that is definitely a thing. And it's also all of the microaggressions. I've 100% been called articulate by opposing counsel in cases. I have, it floats around on the internet, but that when you walk into a courtroom and a bailiff or another attorney assumes you're not an attorney, no matter what you're wearing or what you're carrying. I just walked in with this huge case file, but you still think I'm like self-represented. And I could be, but ultimately it doesn't matter. The issue sometimes is that in this type of law, the law is actually not the deciding factor, if that makes any sense. Like when you are dealing with people, like personalities, relationships, even if the law technically has a preference for one side versus the other, that law may not actually reflect the reality of what's best for that family. It's always humbling. And it could be, sometimes it's not even the law. Like clients sometimes check you. You're not as organized as you thought you were. You're not as good of a communicator as you thought you were. And so often they can be so simple. I've had like clients catch typos and you're just like, but like in the moment, like we're human. It happens. But if you send an email out or you send something out and, it could be as simple as you meant cannot, but it was but you wrote can and didn't catch it. Like these things are always humbling. And I think you just got to take it. That's the reality of any walk of life. You got to figure out like, what am I prepared to accept as rightful censure to be better? A friend of mine has started a nonprofit called Amplify Voices. And what it does is it connects African-American youth here in Chicago, high school age youth, with practicing attorneys for like a 6-week internship in the summer. And obviously as high schoolers, there's not a lot that they can actually do for me. But the point is access. I didn't know any lawyers when I decided to be one. I didn't know any when I went to law school. I had never sat in on a case. I had never, shadowed somebody for a day, which is why I think Northeastern's policy of making their students do these 4 internships over the course of law school is brilliant. It's how I even got here, because without working at these different places, these different types of places, a legal aid, a government, a law firm, I would have no idea what actually practicing law in this context looks like. I had friends who came in and they were adamant that they were going to be defense attorneys, went off on their first co-op internship, came back. Absolutely not. I'm doing prosecution. Or absolutely not. I'm going to do environmental law. You know, like there are people who, but that's important. So when you are, no matter what you're trying to get into, it still comes back to community. You need mentors. You need other people who are in that realm where you could shop stuff to. What type of lens are you using? Hey, have you ever used this like editing program? Hey, I need this, client management system. Like, do you feel like their billing integrates with our, system well? Can it use PDFs? Do I have to convert it to Word? So the JP is, again, it's a network of solo attorneys. So none of us work for each other. We don't work for the JP. But being a solo can be isolating. It can be lonely. And you don't have a sounding board. There's not a partner down the hall that I can just be like, hey, what are you doing on this case? Or have you ever had this? So having other attorneys that I can bounce ideas off of, that I can call and be like, have you ever had a case where like this goes on? I just asked the forum, like DCFS, like how do I get like their notes? So yeah, you got to be able to make connection and community to move through pretty much whatever you want to progress on.